Every business has a story. The problem is most business leaders have trouble telling their story in such a way that it's interesting, that it's entertaining, that people remember it or hopefully repeat it. Well, today I want to tell you the story behind my brand, that is StoryBrand, not because I want to tell you my company's story, although I really do, but I want to give you an example of kind of how to tell your story. I've got another YouTube video out there about how to tell your business's story. So this video is my example of me, Donald Miller, telling the story of my company, StoryBrand. So with that, I'll just get started. Listen, before StoryBrand ever existed, I was already an author. My books were selling really, really well. I wrote memoirs, very literary style memoirs, not business books. However, I also had a conference, and it was a conference business. It's how I made my money. It's how I paid my rent. And every conference that I hosted was half full. This really bothered me. I wanted my conferences to be full. We'd rent the Armory Theater in Portland, Oregon. It had 700 seats and 350 people would show up, and it drove me crazy. And no matter what I tried, I could not figure out why people were not buying tickets to my conference. I just couldn't understand it. They were enjoying my ideas, but they were not taking the next step and coming to the conference. The problem was not my content, it was something else, and I could not figure out what it was. Well, one morning, I got on a flight out of Portland, Oregon to Indianapolis to speak at a conference in Indianapolis. And amazingly, the gentleman sitting next to me was reading my latest book. It was called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, and I had never, ever seen one of my books in the wild before. I was really excited. I jokingly asked him, "What do you think of that book?" Now, my picture is on the back cover of the book, but he still didn't recognize me. He did say that he loved this book, and it was his favorite author, and then he said something that was really amazing. He said, "I am on my way to Indianapolis to hear this guy speak tonight." And I thought, well, that's amazing. So am I. But he still had no idea that he was sitting next to me. So I just decided to run with it. I kept asking him what he liked about the book, but the more he talked, the less I wanted to read my own book. Why? He couldn't summarize it. He couldn't get it down to a sentence that made me want to read it. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't repeat an idea that would make someone else want to buy it. And that is, of course, when I realized I had a problem. The problem was this. I'm really good at writing the 300 pages, but I'm terrible at writing the sentence on the back of the book that made someone want to read it. I'm not good at sales copy. I'm not good at summarizing my offer. I'm not good at sound bites. I have got to get better than that. So I knew I needed to learn to clarify my message. Now, I'd spent years studying story and story structure in order to write these books, and I knew one thing for certain. Story is the most powerful tool for compelling human attention. So I took all the storytelling structures that I'd learned, all the stuff from Robert McKee and Blake Snyder and Christopher Booker and Joseph Campbell and all that kind of stuff, and I created a simple framework to help me clarify my own conference business message. And that framework became the foundation of what would later be called StoryBrand. So this is kind of an important point. The StoryBrand framework did not start as a product. It started as a tool that I used to grow my own business. And once my message became clear, ticket sales actually increased. In fact, we filled up that 700-room theater with a waiting list of about 200. Then we went to a theater in San Diego with about 1,200 and sold that out. Then a theater in Chicago with 2,500 and sold that out. And all I did was use my clarified message on my website, in my lead generators, in my emails. I didn't put any advertising out there at all. I just took the exact same collateral, clarified my message, and sales went up. People were finally able to understand what I offered. And once I saw that it worked for me, I decided to offer it to the public so it could help other businesses grow too. So StoryBrand was born out of that service, not an idea, but a proven solution that would clarify your message. All sorts of companies signed on when they started hearing about the framework. Procter & Gamble was one of my first customers. Ford with the Lincoln division. National security organizations called. I remember working with China deterrence. I thought, what am I doing in this room? But they needed help clarifying the message of why China was a threat. Universities, nonprofits, over 1,000 small businesses called, and we began working with them using this framework. And that's when I realized, oh my word, I've got a second career here. I had written my last memoir at that point. I started writing business books, and I wrote a book called Building a Story Brand. The truth is, Clarity changes everything. I wrote down everything that I learned about clarifying a message and the StoryBrand framework in a book called Building a StoryBrand. I'm currently writing a book called the StoryBrand Soundbite Strategy, and we even created an AI product to help people. The effort grew into an entire company with 38 employees and nearly 1,000 certified representatives helping us. And that is the story of StoryBrand. If I'm at a dinner party, I can get through that story in about 4 minutes. If I'm driving somewhere or talking on the phone or giving a keynote presentation, I can usually get through that story in about 3 minutes. But here's the formula that I just used to tell that story. Hopefully you thought it was kind of interesting. I know YouTube is famous for awful criticism and all that kind of stuff. The truth is, ask yourself this: did I tell the story, the origin story of my company, better than you're telling the origin story of yours? There's a couple things in there that I did that hopefully worked. One is I made the story about you, not about me. Now you say, Don, that doesn't make sense. You talked about yourself and your conference business the whole time. That's true, but I actually talk about a problem that you and I share and how I solved that problem so that my company could grow. You then, in your mind, thought, okay, maybe this will work for me. And let me just ask you this. Did you think that entire time, did you think, you know what, I probably need to clarify my message. I bet we're missing something there. If so, then my story, the origin story of my company, was actually effective. But let's go through the formula that I used just right now to tell that story. One is I started with a problem. I had a problem. I wanted to grow my conference business, but people were not showing up. Then I made it even worse. I did another conference and it was half full, half empty seats, plus nothing I did worked to get people in the room. And then a guide showed up. Now, who's the guide in the story? Robert McKee, Christopher Booker, Blake Snyder. The guide is story and story structure being an effective, compelling tool. That is the tool I decided to use to solve my problem. And then I created the framework, which is a clear solution to solve the problem. And my future was transformed. My businesses were selling out. I wrote books. I started a new company. I can help you do the same. If you want to, just take a screen cap of this. This formula works really well to tell your story. You heard me do it. Was it amazing? It wasn't amazing. Is it better than the average person? I would say it's in the top 1% of people who tell their stories, right? You need to use a formula for telling your story that makes the customer the hero and you the guide. All right, if you like this video, I send out videos at weeklysoundbite.com that are not on YouTube. You can't get them anywhere. It's me breaking down a successful campaign. How Coach Curt Cignetti turned around Indiana football. How Pat Doyle at Domino's turned around Domino's from bankruptcy. How Gwyneth Paltrow took a newsletter and turned it into a $250 million company, all using a soundbite strategy. That is short, repeatable phrases that got people to believe and got customers to place orders. If that sounds interesting to you, go to weeklysoundbite.com and sign up. We have tens of thousands of people getting these weekly soundbite videos. I want you to be one of them. The best way to learn everything I know is to go to weeklysoundbite.com. All right, thanks again. I hope this video helped you tell your story. I hope it helped you understand where StoryBrand came from and understand our story and create a deeper connection between you and my business. That's what I want for you. So go to weeklysoundbite.com and sign up. Until then, I'll see you in the next YouTube video.